It's time we get started with the good stuff here. And I am so happy. Kathy Stieler is here with us, and Brian, uh, pronounce your last name for me, Brian.
Oh, I was hoping you'd take a stab at it. It's Bickness.
I was okay. I just didn't, I was just worried sometimes.
All good.
But Kathy, your last name is so appropriate too. Kathy and Brian are from NATE, and now it's called the Communications Infrastructure Contractors Association. That's a mouthful. And perhaps you remember it more as the National Association of Tower Erectors. And so they've kept that NATE uh, moniker. And they're going to talk to us about some really important things about safety around tower sites and how you could be sure you've got a good tower crew and some of the things that you may not have thought about watching as work is done, but you need to know. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Hi. You want to hit the next one, Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
So, we all recognize this as a tower site. But before I want to talk to you, I want to talk to you about A1048, which is the construction industry safety standard for the telecommunication industry.
Before
But
you do that, tell us about yourself.
well, there you go. Okay, so that's exactly what I was going to say on this slide. Go to the next one, Brian. So I want to tell you first about Nate, and then I'll tell you about Brian and I. Nate was started in 1995. And if you guys remember, National Association of Tower Erectors, about six broadcasters, one broadcaster was coming home from investigating a fatality. And he called a bunch of his friends in the broadcast industry and said, hey, we've got to get something started for the industry. We got to stop these accidents. So about 60 guys got together and met in Dallas, Texas. Again, that was in 1995. We just celebrated our 30th year. We now have about 1,100 members. Out of the 1,100 members of Nate, about 750 of them are contractors. So we do include the tower owners, the American Towers, the Crown Castle, the SBA, a lot of different tower owners, as well as carriers, etc., that are also members of Nate. Nate's mission is safety, and I'll kind of read it to you. It is to pursue, formulate, and adhere to uniform standards of safety to ensure the continued well-being of tower and communications infrastructure personnel. That's who Nate is. Nate, about 4 years ago in 2021, right after the repack, hired me as their first member of their safety team. My name is Kathy Stieler. I've been in construction safety for 46 years. I've just told you my age. The last 11 years, I was in the tower industry in broadcast. It's been since 2011. I was hired by a company to work on their safety program and ended up running their construction division, and I ran broadcast crews. I was involved in the repack, which was just a lot of fun and games. So, and now I'm hired with Nate. I've been with Nate for 4 years as their director of safety, health, and compliance. And I found out that my expertise, which is the standards side of the business and running crews, I'm not a tower hand. So Nate reached out to look for somebody that's a boots on the ground safety person, and we were blessed to find Brian Bicknese.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Kathy. So my name is Brian Bickness. I'm the Director of Safety and Education at Nate. Prior to coming to Nate, I was a contractor for about the last 26, 27 years. And part of that, that was in the wireless space. I did do some broadcast work towards the latter part of my career as a contractor, but my belief has always been live in the boots of the men and women that are on the doing the work. So that's where I started. I started in the field doing construction, line and antenna work. We had cranes at the time, so I wanted to know how to operate a crane, so I became a crane operator. That transitioned into management, middle management, construction management, project management, which led me into safety. I was a firm believer of ensuring that the men and women that we had employed went home each and every day. And so that led me into working with people like Kathy and some amazing men and women in our industry to develop standards. Worked on several different things, several different associations to really protect the men and women in our industry. So I've been with Nate now for about 9 months, and I'm just blessed to be able to, one, be on this with you guys and help out, but more so help the whole industry to ultimately keep them safe. That's our goal.
Okay.
Excellent.
So part of what we do at Nate is provide not only content, but a lot of resources that are available to our members, and we also have a side that's open to the public. We're a firm believer of sharing knowledge. Members do have a lot more additional benefits, but we have items on our website that are available to the general public. So one of those items is the Safety and Health Manual. The Safety and Health Manual, we have 64 different chapters that cover various topics. The main goal with that is that there are individual chapters that a company can adopt that and make it their own, but it has to be based on their own program. It's not a copy paste, here's my whole safety manual approach. Rather, what specific areas that you may not have a program for your manual is available to them. Next thing we do is we provide different industry training initiatives. So, for example, you see on the screen here the Climber Rescue Training Standard, otherwise known as the CRTS. That's one that is the first of its kind. It would originally started as the CTS. We quickly realized that if you're going to be working at elevation, you need to know how to get individuals down as well. So it migrated into the Climber and Rescuer Training Standard, which basically goes over minimum compliance and items that a climber working on the telecommunications industries need to know how to work safe. Next thing on the screen is the RTS, which is the Rigging Training Standard. Again, first of its kind of working specifically on communication structures. If we're going to be working on communication structures, we now have a training standard for a minimum requirement for competent riggers to be able to look at this, trainers to be able to use the curriculum, and ultimately have a competent rigger is the goal. Some of the other things we do, you see on your screen here, the OSHA Susan Harwood grants. There's several topics there that we provide as free of service. We'll be putting in this next year for 2026 for another Harwood grant. But there's several really good topics that are free to anyone, the general public, to attend any of those trainings. Kathy, we'll hand it over to you.
So the next thing that Nate has is something called the STAR Initiative Program, Safety, Training, and is it Reliability or Recognition? And this is an audit program. Contractors can sign up and doesn't cost anything to sign up, but they have access to an audit that they can do of their own personnel. Or, some of the general contractors can actually observe a contractor working on a job site and do an audit. And they follow the audit program of A1048. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Do they have personnel on site that are trained in fall protection, et cetera? We have 172 participating companies, and Brian and I both have been working diligently on a new platform for this to be easier to do the audits. And I think we're going to have a huge jump in participants. OSHA requires contractors to audit their safety program. This is a great way to do it. It's provided by Nate at no cost. And then Nate gets to review what are deficiencies on a job site, not by contractor name, but only by what are the deficiencies. You can see that last year we had 172 people in the program, and we had 3,814 safety audits. Out of that, we had about 1,000 different hazards that were identified and corrected. And it's wonderful information, because if they're having a lot of problems with rigging, then Nate can focus their energies on developing programs to help contractors with training programs on rigging. If they're having problems with the guys aren't wearing their fall protection or whatever, we can focus on how do you train the guys on why you wear your fall protection. Why is it so important? You can see we had about 17,000 employees were impacted. Our crews are trained to OSHA 10. They are also trained to supervisors to the OSHA 30. And, we are looking at those 172 companies. How many hours of training are you spending with your crews? It's amazing that they submitted that they spent 454,000 man hours training their crews. That's incredible. Next. So NATE has also signed a national partnership. It was signed 5 years ago, and then it was re-signed a year ago. We have the FCC as a member of the partnership. We have OSHA as a member of the partnership. And then we have different team structures. I'll let you switch to the next slide. We have an executive team, which Brendan Carr is on our executive team. And we have Bill Donovan, who's on our executive team with OSHA. And then the teams are made up of other members of NATE. We have a tower contractor. We have a member tower themselves. We have a virtual real estate member, telecommunications carrier, construction management team. And all of these people are working toward the same goal of trying to make the telecommunications industry safer. And how do we do that? We look at the data, we look at programs, and we look at training. Again, looking at some of the incidents data that we have received by these audits, you can see that we are tracking where are the issues in the industry. RF is mentioned, you guys. Fall protection is mentioned. And we focus on that training. Why should we focus on something like ladders when our problem is something different? This data helps us. So I want to talk about the reason we're all here is really to talk about the ANSI A10 48 standard. I know you guys have all heard about it. Some of you may even have a copy of it, but I want to kind of start with what it is and why it's so important. So first of all, the questions, what's ANSI? It's the American National Standards Institute. It provides a framework for developing standards. You've got to follow their standard for a consensus document. Then you've got the ASSP, the American Society of Safety Professionals. They work with ANSI to validate the standards that are coming out of ASSP. So ASSP uses the American National Standards Institute framework to develop standards. And why is that important for you to know? Looking at safety from a requirement standpoint, you have laws. And for instance, the Clean Air Law, the Fair Labor Standard Law, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act. But the law with OSHA provides regulations that requires the 1910 regulations and the 1926. Construction industry is 1926. The general industry is 1910. And there are some differences. The crews that are working on your job site fall under the 1926 standards. And then you have the industry standards. And these are, as I said, consensus standards. It's amazing how many people have been involved with writing these standards. These are recommendations or operating practices created by a group of experts that have been agreed upon before they're adopted. So we vote on them. We put together the document and everybody on the team votes on it. And it has to be a consensus. So if there's something in that standard that somebody doesn't like, we fix it. Again, not everything is fixed. It's a consensus. So why do we want to use these? Because the A10 standards really apply directly to the field operations. OSHA is really slow in making changes to their standards. They're talking about a heat standard change right now, and it's been talked about for 10 years?
Yeah.
and they haven't made the change yet. So we look at the A10 standards because we can make a change quicker. If you go into the 1926 standards for OSHA, you'll notice that telecommunications is, what's the term, Brian? Exempt
Basically, yeah.
from fall protection. So we wrote a standard to protect the telecommunications industry because there was a problem with OSHA. They weren't covering them. Within the A10 standards group, that is for construction and demolition operations. There is a standard, the A1048, and we have, I think, 51 A10 standards that are for the construction industry. And you can see them all here. There's a ton.
Yeah, they're definitely focused on each specific industry. And then to OSHA's point, they don't want to get engaged at that level. You know, they're like the umbrella, right?
And you can see where we are now. I'm going to tell you. Well, I guess I need to wait because Brian's going to cover how A1048 came about. But it's a fun situation right now. I'm the new chair of A1048. So if you have a problem with the standard, talk to me. If you have something within the standard you think needs to change that better suits the broadcasters, talk to me. We're going through a process. A1048 was reapproved in 2023. The next approval will most likely be in 2028. And we work hand in hand with a couple other industry standards that are important to you all.
Yeah, Kathy mentioned the history of the 1048, so I'll kind of walk through that a little bit. It was originally designed, well, it started off as what we call the 1019, and the 1019 originally was a gin pole standard, and it worked really well. And it caught on, I guess, from a standards perspective that, hey, if I write something down and we all agree to it, this mantra can actually work. And so the original 1019 was both combined with design and use mindset, and it got pretty gray really quick. And so it was identified that, hang on a second, we need to split this into two different types of standards. And so what you see on top is the engineering side. And so the original document from the engineering side is the 322. So when working on telecommunication structures from an engineer, the engineers will follow the 322. From a means and methods standpoint, from a contractor's perspective, that's where the A1048 comes in. So originally, those two standards were published like right around 2016. The revisions both came out in early 2023, or actually it was early 2024, January 2024. So the 2023 version of the 1048 and then the 322 was adopted or revised with the 322A. So that's kind of the history of those standards.
I need to make one comment. Go back to that slide.
Sure.
Most everybody that's on this call remembers Ernie Jones.
Yeah.
Ernie has been unbelievable and is terribly missed. Ernie wrote the TIA 1019A. That came out in 2011. And again, as Brian said, it was not only an engineering standard for gin pulse use, but it also had some means and methods in it. And from TIA, which is an architectural standard body, they said you can't have means and methods how to do the work in this standard. That's where the split came in.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. So the 1048 was really derived for focused on our industry. And so communications, mostly on wireless side, may or may not be on a telecommunication structure. So it's important to note that this standard does apply when you're doing work on either the construction, demolition, modification, and maintenance of communication structures themselves. So it may or may not apply to certain scopes of work in our industry, but for the most part, it's going to cover everything that we need to, especially the audience we have here today. So lots of things within the standard. We're not going to go into each one, but it gives you a good idea here on the screen of the different areas that we cover for communication structures. As Kathy mentioned, we updated it in 2023. We learned a lot, right? The 2016 version was the first version of the standard that came out. And so, like anything, you quickly realize where the holes are in the standard. And so, we're blessed to be able to revise it. And so, on your screen is going to be several revisions. The first one was it is a standard, so we have to eliminate the gray areas. We changed a lot of the shoulds or best practices into shall. So everything you see in the new standard is a minimum requirement and it's a shall or a must statement. We had redundant information from other standards, whether it was another A10 standard. For example, rigging equipment falls under the B30 standard. So instead of duplicating or replicating what other standards are, we just simply point to them if they're going to be integrated into our scope of work. Yeah, we eliminated the generalized statements. Anything generalities went away. We reorganized the flow, so it kind of is a natural progression of how you approach a job site now with pre-planning and then getting into the specific requirements. We highlighted owner responsibilities and clarify them. That's really important to understand what roles and responsibilities are, whether you're an owner, a client, a structure owner, FCC licensed entity, or a contractor or a qualified engineer. And the last thing here was the definitions updated or reconciled with other standards. The A10 does have a lexicon that utilizes definitions. And so in order for us to have this standard and fall in line, we had to make sure that if we had a definition, it either fell in line or it was specific enough to our industry that we could have our own definition, just from a consistency standpoint. All right. Next slide is going to be, I mentioned part of the A10 is identifying pre-job planning or pre-work planning. And so this can be a little overwhelming, and it's important to know contractors have a lot of work to do before they even arrive on the job site or when day one they get on a job site. So when we talk about project execution plan, this is really in the pre-job planning phase. One of the examples that they have to do is create a fall protection plan. We have to know how to work safe up on that structure. And like I said, with the CRTS, if we're going to go up, we need to know how to come down. What is that plan for that particular structure? Because we all know structures aren't the same. We have to deal with RF. Kathy's going to dive in a little bit deeper on the RF plan side of things. A construction plan. I'll touch base a little bit more on this, but we did change our rigging plans to construction plans to encompass a little bit more scopes of work. Like I said, I'll dive into that a little deeper. We still have rigging plans. We may be using equipment that we need to be planning for. If we're going to be lifting individuals with a hoist, we got to do a trial lift or possibly some proof test. If we're going to be excavating, we need to pre-plan that. Do we need to do benching, shoring, that nature? And if we're using a helicopter or a crane, we got to make sure we're doing a lift or pre-lift meeting. So all these things are just examples of things that we need to be doing ahead of time if I have my contractor hat on. So Kathy, I'll hand it over to you on the RF side of things.
And we all know on the broadcast side how valuable and how important an RF plan is. Before a guy needs to get onto a job site, they should have made contact with the broadcasters, the tower owner. There's a very gray area about who contacts the broadcasters when you've got a job to be done. Working with some of the tower owners, they are saying, hey, we'll make contact. I got to have a phone number, got to have whatever. That has to be in a plan. The guy that's working out on your job site needs to have a plan. I'm going to be going up 1,700 feet. I've got to go through these antennas. Somebody needs to turn them down while I'm going through. I need a phone number if I have to go back through. Or if a cellular crew is on your site working at 200 feet and you've got a broadcast antenna at the top, you don't have to shut down. They're not in your RF. So that plan is critical to the broadcast industry. I understand how critical that is. The contractor on site needs the attention of all the broadcasters to tell them, what is your RF? Do you have an antenna that is a Omni? Do you have one that has a pattern that they need to know about? Do they need to go through the aperture? Can they go behind it? They need to know so they can do their job. And also, if they've got rigging to be done and they've got a job that lasts a long period of time, rigging takes a hit from RF. So they would have to know how to soften their rigging on the tower, how to protect it so it doesn't take a hit in the evening. So please understand the RF plan is part of the A1048, and it's telling them, look at your job, look at your location, where are you going to be working, and what antennas are you going to have to pass by, work through, or work around while you're on the job site. We all know that it does happen that somebody will shut down an antenna, at the job site, and then somebody remotely will turn it back on again. This is why the guys are wearing their RF monitors, so they can validate that they are working in a safe environment.
I put mine on for you, Kathy.
There you go. Did you wear it?
No.
Okay, I'm done. I won't complain anymore.
Sure. So one of the first things that contractors will look at or do when they're out on a job site, and this is through the A1048, is this it's been changed a few times now. We used to know this as JSA, job safety analysis, and what we've identified it as a job hazard analysis. It used to be assessment after JSA, but now it's JHA. It used to be assessment, and now it's analysis, and it breaks down. Assessment's really the process of determining a value or worth of something. If we look at Webster's dictionary, that didn't really fit for what we were doing or what the intent of this is. So analysis is the process of breaking something down into its component parts to understand it better. And that's what we want to do from a pre-job planning standpoint. So a JHA, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be included in on a JHA with the site information, the access information, an emergency action plan, what specific hazards do we have and how are we mitigating them, the individuals that are going to be there, who the competent person needs to be, and or who's authorized to be on a job site, any SDS information, warning signs, and then any weather conditions, just to make sure that we're covering every little detail from a pre-job planning standpoint. The next thing on the 1048 revisions is we went, as I said earlier, from construction plans to rigging plans.
No.
And,
Rigging plan
yeah.
to construction plan.
I'm sorry, I said that backwards. I'm still old school. Yeah, from rigging plans to construction plans. And so the reason that was because not all times that we are working on a structure is rigging involved. And so that's important. I'll give an example here in the next slide. But the other thing that is new is all construction plans now need to be documented and have access on the job site, regardless of the operations that need to be or that are going to be worked on. So an example of the work that we may be performing that definitely affects the structure, but we would not be doing any rigging is an example like you see on the screen here now. So this is an example of the soil being excavated around and modify the pier or the caisson to the base of a structure. No rigging was performed, but at the same time, this is definitely affecting the integrity and stability of the structure. So the reason why we engage this or consider this a class 4 structure is because we need to have an engineer review the plan of what we're doing, in this case, an excavation plan. So like this one, for example, was excavating 2 feet around, monitor, two more feet, monitor, verified straight, also having monitors, crack monitors and level monitors watching the structure as excavating out. So, and making sure that that structure was going to be the stability wasn't affected when all the soil was removed. So wind limitations were into play, as well as duration of the open hole.
One of the other kind of things that you don't think about that would require a construction plan versus a rigging plan is if there is any kind of a modification to a tower. You're changing out a redundant, you're changing out a diagonal. Somebody needs to review that from the engineering side to say what you are doing won't affect the integrity of the tower. That's not rigging, that's construction plan. So as you're asking people to do work on your tower, if, you know, even if it's a simple antenna change out, a construction plan still must be done just to make sure that the integrity of the tower is not harmed in any way. One of the other thing that A1048 brings out a lot in the standard is a competent person. A competent person has to be on site for all of your work. A competent person for even the fall protection plan. A competent person for your rescue plan. A competent person for your rigging. Your competent person for your hoist operator. OSHA is very specific that you've got to have competent people on site. Might be 2 or 3 different people. The other thing that happens is a foreman is typically your competent person. Well, what happens if he leaves the site and goes to runs and picks up material? Somebody has to be designated the competent person in his place. So if a situation pops up, they can react appropriately. And again, I talk about it, and it's not tongue in cheek. It's very important that the guys on the site know that they're the competent person. So the foreman can't just say so-and-so's it for the day and he leaves to go run his errand. That person that he is designated as a competent person has to understand the rules and responsibilities that go along with it. If there's an emergency, he's got to answer it now. The other thing that is really important within the A1048 standard is this climbing and rescue section. We actually specifically tell the industry how many climbers must be on a tower. If you're climbing at height, you have to have at least one competent climber, and they do have cards, they've been trained, and one authorized. So you could have a new guy. Let's say you want to do a tower inspection. An engineer is going out to do an inspection on your tower. He's got to have his competent climbing card, and he's got a new engineer with him. That person has to have a card also. They can be authorized, they can be competent. If you have a 3-man crew working on your site, you've got to have, and you're working at height, you have to have 2 competent climbers and 1 authorized. The competent climber card includes rescue. So these people are able to do a rescue on the site. That's what the new cards are, climbing rescue cards. Okay. And I know for a fact that, you know, if you've got a VISWAR issue on your tower and you want somebody to run up and just check to see if there is a hole in a line or whatever, the A1048 standard has this requirement for a 2-person, you know, crew to go up there. That's a pain for you guys, and I understand it. I also know that we lost Ernie Jones because he went back up onto a tower. He was the only one up there, left a broadcaster down on the ground to run the elevator, and went back on the elevator and forgot to unhook his safety as he was getting back into the elevator. There's a reason the standard's written that way. 2 people. A1048 standard also says the equipment for the fall protection crew has to meet the Z359. That is the fall protection standard. A1048, you know, is very specific on fall protection and rescue plan requirements. You got to have a way to get them off the tower. It also specifies, you know, the first aid. So if you're at 1,000 feet as an engineer inspecting the tower, how are you going to get the guy off the tower that, you know, passed out from a heart attack? How are you going to get him down? We also, within the A1048 standard, we point to the NATE CRTS for a minimum training standard. We point to the fall protection standard Z359, but we point to the CRTS. Again, that's kind of where NATE is. We have a lot of experts in the industry that work on towers. And when you look at the fall protection standards, they're not tower people. So we have to look at how are we going to protect our industry, and this is how we do it. We wrote the standard and we point to it within our A1048 standard. Again, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add, Kathy, so one quick thing, a note, the authorized and competent people on the crew, the minimum requirement within the CRTS, the part of the revision, it used to be that there was separate competent climber and a separate competent rescuer. Now, with the revision of the CRTS, that authorized individual that's on the job site also knows how to rescue. So I just want to make sure we mention that.
And you actually should be able to go out to a job site and say, I'd like to see your cards. If you're worried that they don't have that training, you should be able to go out to the job site and say, I want to see your cards, because the guys are supposed to carry them, or send them to me. Yep. Okay. The other thing to note in this whole climbing training is the climbing facilities. We know their tower has climbing facilities on it. Written into the A1048 standard is that in order to use a climbing facility that's on the tower, it has to be inspected first. Now, they can climb it, but they're going to have to crab claw all the way up. They can't just hook up, their climbing device and go up and expect it to be okay. There have been some changes in some of the providers of climbing facilities, safe climb devices, that now they have open heads so you can see if it's still connected at the top. We are finding that there are a lot of climbing facilities that have been damaged. So the only way these guys know if that facility is able to be used is to inspect it first. And again, they can be hooked up to it and they can crab claw up the tower. The first person that goes up does the inspection. He tells the rest of the guys it's okay to use. Okay. As Brian said, within the A1048 standard, we have specific definitions of who people are, who are the stakeholders. So the owner client, when you're reading the standard, there are specific things that they have to provide. So the owner has to provide information required for the contractor to develop the site-specific construction and job hazard analysis. So that would be going to, let's say, I hate to throw tower companies under the bus. Let's say go to American Tower and say, tell me who's on the tower that I'm going to be working around. Again, a cellular company that only goes up 200 feet or 250 feet doesn't need to know who's at the very top of the tower. But a broadcast contractor that works at 1,000 feet needs to know who are the antenna owners, the broadcast owners up to that place that I have to work around. And that's the owner client is who you're working with. So let's say it's you as a broadcaster. I'm working with you. You have to help me gather that information. The structure owner, again, is whoever owns the structure, and they're the ones that can help the owner of the project tell you who you're working with. And then you've got the FCC licensees, so that's you broadcasters. If you're asked, to give information, it's not because we want anything except we need to know how to keep our workers safe. How do we go through your antenna? If you say it's a directional and you're not going to bother it, if you can go behind it and you're not hurting it, sure, let them go behind it and you're not getting into the aperture. But if you have an Omni, you got to know everything. And in the bottom of that, it's funny because through the repack, we were working on towers, all the tower farms. We were working on a tower that was adjacent or close to another tower. And we were working up on a broadcast at the very top of the tower. And the guys were getting burned because of the tower next door. It was radiating so much into them. So there's a possibility that you would be called for input if you're at a tower next door.
So Barry introduced us, as the National Association of Tower Erectors, and he mentioned the Communications Infrastructure Contractor Association. The reason behind that is we felt that, like most industries, we've evolved. And in 2020, we did do a rebrand from the National Association of Tower Erectors to the Communications Infrastructure Contractor Association. Yes, that's a mouthful. But it was intentional. We wanted to make sure that our members were diverse. They are diverse, and that we built standards and advocated for them. There's definitely ones that are outside of erecting towers. So we've been doing that since '95. We are the voice of tower construction, service, and maintenance industry. And we do provide a ton of safety content through education, standards, and professionalism. We have a ton of resources on our website. We do a lot of advocating. We just got done with a NATE fly-in this week that out in DC, meeting with members of Congress and had, several members out there. I couldn't give you a number. But we do a lot of stuff with not only writing standards, but just advocating as well. And so the membership side, we do a lot of, like I said, a lot of stuff, but our goal is to give you a voice. There's a saying that's used out there, and I use it quite a bit, but is if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And we've always been a firm believer of that, is we need to be engaged and involved so that we protect not only broadcasters like you, but contractors, so that standards aren't written in a way that hinders their work. For you guys in particular, you're looked at as industry experts and leaders, and so your advice and your input is important to us. And the biggest thing is just open line of communication. I can't tell you how much, whether it's via phone calls or emails, or meetings or things like this, that we've learned so much from each other. And so that's our goal with NATE.
We forgot to mention
yeah.
this week.
Yeah, so this week we talked about it earlier, but OSHA puts out every year a national safety stand down with emphasis to protect workers from falls at elevation. And so obviously that's right up our alley, working on communication structures. So we dove in with a new topic every day, whether it was see something, say something, continuous fall protection. We're changing within standards writing and standards development. We realized that context and vernacular is very important. And so it used to be when we were working on structures that we were 100% tied off, and what that meant. Well, that really didn't make sense from a standards perspective. So we've been shifting that to continuous fall protection. So we pushed out the reasons behind that. We have Wednesday was Tower Technician Appreciation Day, along with what's your reason to stay safe, or what's your why. And then we talked about anchorage strengths and slings that contractors use to make sure they're using the right slings. So yeah, that's just one of many things that NATE does. It's nonstop. It really is. So we like I said, our goal is to help, to advocate, and ultimately keep people safe. Kathy, do you have anything else you want to add there?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Barry, did we miss something?
Well, whoops. Am I hooked up here? Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
I find this very interesting because I've seen good tower situations. I've seen some really bad ones, and some of the things that have happened are because of lack of training. And
Yes.
then on the other hand, I've seen some really good projects come together, and the station really works out to its benefit. You mentioned NATE as an organization, and you mentioned some materials that were available to members. but not many broadcasters are going to be your members. So the question that I would first pose, and anyone else has questions are welcome to join in. What do you offer to a single radio station, a cluster, or a group?
Well, the website is full of information. Remember that it was originally established as a contractor association, so a lot of our stuff is geared toward the contractor. But we do have, tower owner specifics on migratory birds, on how to deal with bird situations. We have a tremendous amount of PANs, planning advisory notices, related to the construction plan to understand how that construction plan works. It would help a broadcaster to know what the expectations are of a contractor and why they are doing something. That kind of information is available on our website. Go to natehome.com and you can get so many safety resources. The SCMC, which is the Safety Equipment Manufacturing Group Committee, does testing, and they did testing on step pegs. They did testing on climbing facilities. They did testing on lanyards, where they found out which lanyard was a good one for the crew or a bad one. So that information is available. Did I see a chat question?
It sure did. We have one that says, can one be authorized but not competent, or vice versa? Who can authorize someone? Does the two-man requirement mean that both of them must be at height?
So, yes and
Yeah.
yes. So the authorized term basically is for a new person in the industry. They're required to work in the industry for at least 90 days minimum before they can become competent. The company that they're working for is the person that deems them competent. So if I was working for Precision Communication would train somebody in climbing when they first began to work for them. And after 90 days, they can retest them and see if they can declare them as competent. But until then, they've been trained, they've got their harnesses, they've been trained in rescue, and they're authorized to do the work on the tower. So the authorization comes from, and the competency comes from the contractor.
And so
Okay.
it's important to pick the right contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the second part of that question, does the two-man requirement mean that both of them must be at height? That's no. As long as the fall protection plan and rescue plan dictate means and methods of how to rescue somebody, it's irrelevant of where they're at, just they need to be on the job site.
Right.
If I'm considering a contractor, can I call you guys and get a recommendation or a assessment?
We
If
can
you're
give you a list of current NATE members. I guess, yeah, you may have to be a NATE member to get that, I guess. But we can't play biased with anything from a contractor's perspective. But you can certainly ask a contractor if they're a NATE member. That usually is a good indicator of more things to come.
the NATE members, I mean, that's the only contractors I used when I was doing work were NATE members, because I wanted that face to face. They can't hurt. I want to see them. I want to interact with them all the time. One of the questions came up is, do the insurance company give erectors a break if they follow NATE requirements? Yes. We have several insurance providers that are members of NATE. And yes, they do look at the NATE membership. They look at their participation in the STAR program, which validates their program. They're doing audits, et cetera. And yes, they do get some sort of discounts. What that discount is, I don't know.
So I'll turn that around and ask you this. If I'm going to do a project, can I call you and you tell me a NATE member that's in the area?
That is available on the website. You can look it up now.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's
You can go to the NATE website and look up members in locations.
And
Yes.
it's NATEHOME, natehome.com, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Because if you just type in Nate, you get something else.
Yeah, you don't want that one. You want natehome.com.
All right. Anyone else have a question for Kathy or Brian?
You guys are incredibly quiet.
Well, you guys have covered the topic very well. But yeah, the questions, when we think about putting a project together, and one of the things, and I mentioned this earlier before we get started, there are crews that come around and offer their services cheap. And sometimes this can be a real problem. I know of a station that got their towers painted, and a couple of months later, towers didn't look right.
Right.
But where do you find these guys after that? They're gone. So it really is important to know who you are hiring to do a job.
We always recommend a pre-qualification for your crews. That a broadcaster would ask somebody, what are your abilities, what are your training, etc. I always had a pre-qual. That's expected. A good contractor would expect a broadcaster to ask those questions to pre-qualify them.
And then
Absolutely.
again, to turn that around, somewhere on your site, do you have a checklist of questions for the broadcaster to ask?
We do. That's all part of the STAR program. Absolutely.
Okay. Is that right on off the front page, or if somebody was with us, say, and they wanted to get that checklist, where would they find it?
I
They
think
would,
the best thing there would be reach out to us.
Okay.
Because then we will personalize it. We can point and get anything you need. That's what Kathy and I are here for. We're a resource for anyone and everyone, especially this audience. Feel free to reach out to us. I don't know if Barry, you want to can share our email information or contact information.
Absolutely. Do you have a
Yeah.
slide for that?
I don't, but we can add it when we go to send this out. I can add that in. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. We got Kathy at natehome.com and Brian at
Yep.
natehome.com. That's a
Yep.
real rough one, isn't it? What about your phone number?
Brian and I laugh about it that, we are Google for the industry. And you can get our phone numbers on the website as well. That's my cell number. That's Kathy's.
812-204-8832.
Right. Brian, I don't know yours off the top of my
Yeah, I
head.
can put mine in. Should I put my real one or a fake one?
Yeah.
What are you, AI now?
Yeah, right.
I will tell you that we take a lot of emails, inquiries, and Brian and I are very good about answering the inquiries. We will send you to somebody that has an answer that we don't, but we are very good about answering questions for members and non-members alike. Again, the advantage of membership at NATE kind of puts you at the table to talk to the contractors and puts you at the table to talk to tower owners. We will add a slide to our PowerPoint that includes our email address and our phone number.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Kathy, there's a question about membership costs too that popped in.
How much, work that you do, whatever. Again, if you ask me directly, I can have somebody send you exactly what it would cost.
Yeah.
I will tell you that we have the NATE Unite every year in February. NAB is always in April, but NATE Unite is specifically for the tower, for NATE. We had 4,000 people there, 3,500 people there this last year in Raleigh. Next year is going to be in Las Vegas. So many educational sessions, trade show, so much going on, but it's a great conference for the contractors and for, the people that use the contractors. Again, I can tell you about in that membership, if you become a member, then of course the rates are significantly reduced to go to that trade show.
Well, I'll certainly invite all our listeners and viewers to jump over to your website to check with you in terms of hiring a construction crew or maintenance crew, and to get to understand uh, the many opportunities for understanding and education about construction safety, tower safety.
I do like to thank this industry, the broadcasters in particular. Again, when I came in 2011, I knew nothing about the broadcast industry. The broadcasters were good to me. And I need to say thank you because you taught me a lot. I can give you a crew to work on your site, but you're the experts. You're the ones that know all about your antennas. You are absolutely so valuable to me. You taught me a lot, and I can't thank you enough. Yes, I did some cool stuff. I worked on the Empire and I worked on Sutro, but I went to your job sites and talked with you broadcasters. You were so good to me for a new person in the industry. It worries me because you guys are getting older.
That is true. I think I got it this time.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
So I want to make sure, because we're going to post a video tomorrow morning for those that weren't able to get here this afternoon, and I want to make sure that the contact information is very clear. So Kathy, Brian, thank you. Thank you so very much for your time, for the experienced information that you bring to us, and I hope that our readers and viewers will take advantage of it.
Thanks for
I
having
hope
us.
so. Thank you so much.